The country is caught up in the global hype of the fourth industrial revolution. But the questions remain. Is the Department of Basic Education prepared for this change? And are our educators equipped for it? And have they been trained to teach new trends in the education sector? Well, Dr. Corinne Varadi from the IDEA Digital Education says before embracing the fourth industrial revolution, it's important to make sure that South Africa has educators who are skilled in the function of a modern economy. Varadi from Nairobi, and I'm joined also by Seliki Tabane from the Department of Education, who is in our Pretoria studios to give us more insights on this issue. Gentlemen, good evening to both of you, and thank you very much for your time. If I may start with you, Mr. Varadi, first. When we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, what has been your experience? Are people talking about one and the same thing throughout the continent of Africa, throughout the world?
No, look, I think the biggest misconception around the fourth industrial revolution is that there's going to be this finite moment of time in the future, in 20 or 30 years' time, and we're going to have a launch and a ceremony, and all of a sudden we greet a new era of technology. But the reality is, and if you go around any tech-enabled schools in South Africa at the moment, you'll actually see the fourth industrial revolution. We're in the middle of it. We're actually in the middle of a technology-infused life, both in our labor market and in our personal lives. So I think that there's misconception around what is the fourth industrial revolution. It's not just about augmented reality and virtual reality and AI. It's actually about the fundamental impact and integration of digital in our lives. So I think that's one problem. I think the other problem that we have is that people think that they can embrace the fourth industrial revolution by taking on basic digital literacy skills. But the reality is the fourth industrial revolution's terminology is about innovation in technology. And that isn't about how do we pass a basic IT examination. So I think those two areas really need to be focused on so that our youth can take on both the labor market and our education system.
Mr. Tabane, from where you sit, are we talking about one and the same thing when we talk about a fourth industrial revolution here in our country in particular?
Vuyo, I think we're talking the same thing. I think we do understand that this revolution, the fourth one, is characterized by new technologies that largely impact how we live and how we work. And we do know that we have to transform how we deliver our core business as basic education. It is sometimes misunderstood to mean infrastructure like computers only and the deployment of devices into spaces where people live. But it is much more than that, because it has to do with the skills and competencies as well that people must possess for them to be able to perform and exist in this new era, which is dominated by machines and internet and artificial intelligence and big data, as we say. But yeah, it is very clear that the nation, to a very great extent, understands what we're talking about.
But are we prepared for it?
Nobody's prepared for it, and the world is not even prepared for it. The revolution in its nature, when it comes, it catches us while entrenched in a way of doing things, in a way of living, and what it brings into our lives is what is called the disruption. So it disrupts how you live, how you do your business, and nobody can actually even tell what type of changes it is going to bring. For instance, UNESCO suggests that 65% of the current jobs that are in existence right now will not be there in 15 to 20 years time, but nobody can tell how jobs are going to look like. But what we know are the type of skills that people must possess for them to be able to work in that environment that research says some of the jobs are going to be automated, particularly the routine ones, and some of the functions.
And I guess that speaks to what you have to do to future-proof South Africa's children, so to speak, so that they are at least ready to be able to embrace whatever opportunities there may be, or whatever to take them to whatever direction that the world is leading them to.
Yes, you are correct, Vuyo. And the Department of Basic Education has put plans in place that respond to these demands of the fourth industrial revolution. For instance, the curriculum as we have known it, and as it is currently, emphasizes recollection of facts and mastery of procedures, that a child who can recall facts as they exist will be rewarded with marks and with certificates, and a child who can demonstrate that they can recall procedure step by step, what needs to be done to solve a mathematical or a scientific a problem, for instance, will be rewarded with high marks. But what we are doing to respond and to prepare our learners, we are refocusing our curriculum to what we call competency-based approaches, and also integrating skills and competencies into the curriculum. And these skills are well defined, and they're already there in our curriculum. We just need to bring them to life. The Brookings Institutes in the USA confirmed that when they compared curricula of about 10 countries, they found that the South African curriculum already has those skills that are required. Those skills are like critical thinking, teamwork, collaborative work, that we need to produce generation of learners who are able to work together, who are able to solve problems, who are able to innovate. And we are refocusing our curriculum to be responsive to these demands. And that these skills, we are integrating them across various subjects within our curriculum, and we are also introducing new subjects that don't exist at the moment, like coding and robotics, like maritime studies, and we also integrating these skills into already existing subjects, that when we teach mathematics, it must not just be about a child recalling the tables, for instance, but they must make meaning of this and be able to apply them in real life.
Mr. Varadi, traveling throughout the continent, what has been your experience? Are there countries or systems that prepare the continent's children better than others, and if so, what's been the sort of continental best practice that perhaps others can learn from?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of innovation happening in the education systems beyond South Africa, but the one thing I try and remind everyone in South Africa is that actually we're doing really well. And I think that there are pockets of excellence across the country that are competing not just on an African continental basis, but on a global level. And I think we're starting to prove the model can work in our basic education system in terms of the integration of technology. But countries like Rwanda, and even here in Kenya, where I am at the moment, are really leapfrogging from a technology point of view, and really looking at, as Mr. Tlhabane said, the competency-based curriculum, and how do they actually take on the curriculum challenges that a digital and global economy takes on. So I think that working with East African and West African peers is going to be really important. But I do think that there's a lot for Africa to learn from South Africa, which they may not at the moment. And I think that actually South Africa is doing really well in a lot of the provinces that have embraced e-teaching and e-learning as a core tenet of how to develop and promote their students. And that goes well beyond just about developing their coding or the superficial after-school programs. It's really looking about how do we drive core curriculum technology and therefore really deliver a more democratic way of accessing a competency-based curriculum.
And what about the training of the educator themselves? Is it where it ought to be given where things are across and around the world? Mr. Varadi?
Look, we can always do better, I think, is it needs to be our motto. And in a constantly changing technology evolution space, we have to accept that. And we have to accept that what we see as proficiency and skills training in 6 months, in 12 months may change again over the coming years. I do think that, one thing I've noticed about South African teachers is that they are ready to embrace technology. They are ready to embrace new ways of thinking in learning and teaching. So I don't think that there should be any of the stigmas that have been involved in a lot of the reports that come out saying, well, professional learning is a real struggle for teachers. Actually, the teachers really have a very large appetite for professional learning. I've had no experiences with teachers where they don't want to try and implement content, devices, and new ways of thinking into their schools. I do think we have to start looking at how do we prepare those teachers beyond giving them basic IT and ICT skills, because I think that's where we're probably succeeding at the moment, but we're about to grow ourselves out of that. And I think that part of where we will be in 12 to 24 months is going to be a much more outcome-driven technology space. And the teachers need to feel comfortable that they were given the opportunity to embrace that so that they could also transform themselves, not just the students.
Mr. Tlhabane, are these schools and their teachers adequately resourced?
Adequately, no. We are the first to acknowledge that we are not where we are supposed to be. But it's important that we must recognize the gains that we have made. We have made huge progress in developing our teachers and preparing them for these changes. We have developed resources, like, for instance, as I indicated earlier on, that our core business as the Department of Basic Education is teaching and learning, and that our teachers have been provided with resources that are available through our portals and through various platforms, both online and offline, where teachers can actually begin to use these resources. And there are teachers who are very innovative, Vuyo, who also use open source resources, where they can develop their own materials or even get the resources free of charge on these platforms. We have partnered with business like Vodacom, MTN, and other big players who have assisted us to put our wealth of resources on their platforms, and they are freely available. We say we have zero-rated them, or we have zero-rated the platform, that anybody who wants to use them may be able to use them at no cost. But there are other regulations that are in place in that space that is outside of the control of basic education, where a user, a subscriber of one network, for instance, when they access resources from the platforms of another network operator, they pay a certain fee. So what we are doing is we are creating platforms where if a Vodacom subscriber, for instance, or an MTN subscriber or Cell C subscriber, if they access these resources on those platforms where they are subscribed, they will not have to pay, and they will receive them free of charge. We have digitized more than 95% of our high enrollment subjects, and we are able to close. We are about to close that gap. We have not yet trained teachers to the levels where they'll be able to create their own materials, but we have trained more than 50% of our teachers on basic operations of how to use digital resources and digital infrastructure. So I would say, yes, you are correct. We are not where we are supposed to, and we acknowledge that, but we have made huge strides, and contrary to the assumption that the older teachers are not so much receptive to technology, our experiences on the ground are telling us that older teachers are embracing technology as well as the younger teachers, and they are using it in their classrooms.
Gentlemen, thanks to both of you. That's where we're going to leave it for tonight. Dr. Corinne Varadi from the IDEA Digital Education talking to us via Skype from Nairobi, and Seliki Tlhabane from the Department of Education talking to us from our Pretoria studios. Both of them are quite happy with the progress that we are making in preparing our children for the fourth industrial revolution.